All right. I think we are live. Hello, all six of you. We're moving up in the world. Happy early Friday night. And we might end up doing these a little earlier on Friday, only because I now have some places I have to be early Saturday morning. Um, Den is helping out in the moderation queue, so he'll sign his name onto things under Friendly Atheist. But if you have questions, please go ahead and ask them throughout tonight. And I feel like I'm legally obligated to say, you know the drill. Please like and subscribe and donate if you can. You can also support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hement. And if you want your question answered, leave a super like and we'll absolutely get to it between different stories. So I don't have a million stories to talk about, but the ones I do want to talk about today, they strike me as fairly significant ones. But before I get into all that, I had one bit of exciting good news that I wanted to share before I get into a story that uh, has a really sad ending that I will talk about. But I got this thing in the mail uh, from YouTube, and I didn't open it yet, but I figured I would do it for the first time here today. So it comes in very fancy packaging, and this is really cool. It is a thing. It is the thing that says I passed 100,000 subscribers. You can't see this, I realize, in this thing, but yay, Friendly Atheist, for passing 100,000 subscribers. I'll read the little note they sent. In a little, what does it say? Do you remember your first subscriber, your 100th? Chances are you do. We're proud to have you. We're proud to honor your impressive milestone of reaching 100,000 subscribers with the Silver Creator Award. Congratulations. That's really sweet. So that's awesome. Thank you to those of you who have subscribed for helping make that happen. There is no check in this box, which that's unfortunate, but it is a cool plaque. I wish I had a place to put it like right behind me, and I totally will never find a way to do that. But that's very cool, and thank you all very much for subscribing if you are one. So let me actually start out with the story that I found out about this story yesterday. I just before I started doing this tonight, I just learned a really horrible update to it. And I swear this is a story that I it bothered me at first. No, I'm going to take that back. Let me start this over. I heard about this story yesterday for the first time. I got an update about it 24 hours later, like right before I came on air tonight. And this is why I think I want to start with this story because it's really disturbing what it's all about. And I'm going to share with you um what this involves. Here's the person in question. I will say this has a tragic ending. You've been warned about it. It involves this fellow over here. His name is Bubba Copeland. And basically, Bubba over here, he is a mayor in a city called Smith's Station, Alabama. He also has another job where he serves as pastor. He is pastor of First Baptist Church in a place called Phoenix City, Alabama, nearby. So, for several years now, the past 8 years, this guy has held this dual role as a mayor and a pastor of a Baptist church, fairly conservative, rural community. So, right off the bat, you probably have some stereotypes about who he is, what he believes, the sort of people in his community, the sort of people in his church. And I'd never heard of the guy, but I will tell you a little bit about what he is, I guess, known for. One of the things you could see here on this website, he served on the Lee County Board of Education for 11 years. before becoming mayor. In addition to serving as mayor, he owns a small business. He pastors at the church. Okay, fine. There's actually a photo on Facebook. Let me share this with you. He posted this in 2020. So this is during the pandemic, but I think this picture is from a year before because there was like a hurricane or something that hit his small town in Alabama. And so one of the things, I'm just going to show you the picture first. You can see he has a photo op with Donald Trump, who came by to talk to him about, whatever presidents do when a natural disaster hits a community. And what he said in that thing, never in a million years did I think my first term as mayor would include dealing with a deadly tornado. Well, sorry, it was tornado, not a hurricane, global pandemic, and several student suicides. There's no instruction manual for this job. However, I do have my own personal manual, and that is my Bible. God will sustain you through anything as long as you commit your life to Him. Okay, think of that what you will, but it's I still, when I read all that stuff, my first thought, I will freely admit, is okay, I feel like I already know this guy, right? Small town mayor, rural mayor, guy who is apparently proud of his photo op with Donald Trump, a guy who talks about God freely because he's a pastor, but he also talks about it as a mayor that God will guide you through anything. And that's why when I saw this guy's name in the news earlier this week, uh, I kind of felt a little bit of schadenfreude because this is the headline that appeared in a website called 1819 News. Check this out. This is the headline. The Secret Life of Smith's Station Mayor and Baptist Pastor F.L. Bubba Copeland as a transgender curvy girl. Apparently, it's a hobby I do to relieve stress. And they include this picture of the mayor on the left and his online alter ego on the right. I'm just going to leave this up there. By the way, 1819 is a reference to when Alabama entered the Union. But what you should know about this website is it's basically, as far as I can tell, a right-wing media outlet that happened to produce, they produced this story. So the story that they're giving here, I'm not going to show you all the pictures that involve this guy. But the story that they say is that he poses as a transitioning transgender curvy girl on social media outlets. He has an online persona named Brittany, and Brittany is who he dresses up with. He would post images on Instagram, on Reddit. They weren't exactly like nude photos or anything like that. Some of them were a little bit racy, but whatever. Like, that's what the guy does in his free time. And he was apparently doing this for a number of years. The reporter, Craig Monger, got a lot of screenshots of what Copeland posted on Instagram and Reddit. He also got a hold of fictional erotica that Copeland had written also under that pseudonym and posted on another website. And the thing is, of course, you don't expect any of this to happen with a Baptist preacher. Of course, that seems hypocritical because if there's one thing about, Baptist preachers is that they really don't like LGBTQ people. And of course, you would think they don't like trans people. And cross dressing is a sin. And so that's where I think the story was going. It was saying, we caught this guy doing this stuff online. We have all the proof of it. And it turns out he doesn't exactly deny it either. According to that article, I will show you one little bit of it. After collecting all this stuff, all this information, they finally confronted him about it. And here is that exchange right here. Let me show you. Here you go. This is from 1819 News, again, right-wing website. During an interview with 1819 News, Copeland confirmed that he operated the account and was featured in the pictures. He claimed it was only a means of getting rid of stress, and called the postings a hobby and a fantasy. He also said his erotica was purely fiction. After the interview, Copeland promptly deleted the accounts and asked them not to be made public due to his family and position as a pastor. Copeland initially denied having any knowledge of the accounts, but when he was made aware of the social media evidence, like the screenshots and all that, he quickly admitted to running the page. He also said that his wife was aware of his activity, but no one else in the community. Copeland told 1819 News dressing up as a woman has been a hobby since youth as a release from anxiety. So, again, you can understand why this outlet wanted to out him because that sure seems hypocritical. And again, I want to stress that was my first reaction too when I saw it. My first reaction was like, hell yeah, go get him, bring him down. Um, and by the way, I saw this article cited on a couple other news outlets as of last night saying we're going to reproduce that article or we're going to write our own, just pointing people to it because oh boy, that seems very titillating, right? So that's why people were interested in this story. Now, just to be clear, he is not actually a trans woman. It's not like he's hiding it and doing this stuff online was his way of doing it like secretly. Like, no, he's not trans at all. That's just the character he created. He does apparently like cross dressing, but like, whatever. I don't care. He said he's playing that character because it's an escape from his normal life. I'm sure, I would imagine it's kind of an ego boost for this guy who says elsewhere in the article, like, I'm not necessarily an attractive man, but when he dresses up like this persona, this woman, he feels sexy. And I'm sure there was some sort of ego boost that comes when you post pictures of yourself as this woman, this curvy woman that he's trying to portray, and he gets positive feedback on places where you can upvote pictures and people are telling you how attractive you are. I'm sure that was part of the thrill for him. But clearly he was embarrassed that he got caught. I don't know that his wife actually knew about any of this. Frankly, it's none of my business. It's his business. But I do understand why he really wanted to keep this side of him a secret. So on Wednesday night, a couple nights ago, shortly after this article started making some rounds, he had church service that night. And I'm not going to play the whole thing for you, but he did deliver a short sermon where he basically said he was the victim of an internet attack. And I'm going to read to you a little bit of what he said. He said in the sermon, I have been an object of an internet attack. Let me share this with you here so you can see this. Let me move this up here. An article that was written about my capacity as the mayor and capacity as a pastor. This article is not who or what I am. Yes, I have taken pictures with my wife in the privacy of our home in an attempt of humor, because I know I'm not a handsome man nor a beautiful woman either. I apologize for any embarrassment caused by my private personal life that has become public, basically. He says this will not cause my life to change. This will not waver my devotion to my family, to serving my city, and to serving my church. I'm thankful for the grace of God and the willingness to forgive. I have nothing to be ashamed of. He also says a lot of the things that were said were taken out of context. And in conclusion, I love my family. They're number one. And again, I'm sorry for what my actions have caused. And I'm thankful for the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that have reached out to me today. So this is the sermon he gave on Wednesday night. Clearly in a state of panic, I would imagine, because, I mean, listen, I don't care necessarily what people do in their private life, but to have that go public, I mean, that's between him and his family, man. That's not necessarily the rest of our business unless he is like another Ted Haggard. If that's the case, if this is a guy who spends all of his time trashing trans people, denying trans identities, bashing LGBTQ people, then I think this is fair game. So this is where, and by the way, I should add one more thing, that after this aired, I saw this as well. This is from the Alabama Baptist State Convention and Alabama Baptist State Board of Missions. They issued a statement in response to all this. We have become aware of the alleged unbiblical behavior related to the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Phoenix City. We are praying for the leaders of the church family as they seek to determine the truth concerning these accusations. As the people of God, we pray for the pastor and his family as well. We are in consultation with the Russell Baptist Association's leadership as they endeavor to assist the First Baptist family during this critical time of need. Okay, and it's signed by a bunch of dudes who run that thing. Okay, so this is where we were at a couple of days ago. Like, that statement, by the way, is a little weird because they're like, we need to do a determination. Let's determine the truth of this unbiblical behavior. I'm not sure what determination they need because Copeland already admitted to doing all of that. But I did find it weird. They didn't say Copeland should be kicked out of his church, even if he did do it. They also didn't specify what unbiblical behavior he did. Was it pretending to be a trans woman? Was it dressing in drag? Was it the fact that all of this was a secret? There was actually in the 1819 news article, they mentioned the Alabama Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, and that's a larger group of which Copeland's church is a member. They didn't specify a punishment either. They said this would appear to be a matter between pastor and church. And so this is where I was at a couple of nights ago, or last night, I should say, after this all came to my attention, because it sounded weird to me. Again, if he's a hypocrite, screw the guy, right? But it was a little weird that all these Baptist groups were like, this seems kind of bad, but this is their problem. They need to figure it out. His church needs to figure it out, which seemed rather mild. And this is where me and the article started parting ways there, because as much as I want to join the pile-on, the thing that struck me as weird about all of this is that the entire article in 1819 News did not mention, they did not have clips, they did not have screenshots of examples of this guy being anti-LGBTQ. You would think in an article, let's say we're talking about Ted Haggard or we're talking about Jerry Falwell Jr., and you wanted to point out his hypocrisy. You would say, oh, this is what he does in his private life, according to the pool boy or according to the male escort that Ted Haggard hired. And this is what these men said from the pulpit or online on social media. And you can see the hypocrisy. In the case of Bubba Copeland, in the article in 1819 News, there was none of that. They didn't include a single example of him being anti-trans, anti-gay, or even really examples of him being ultra-conservative. And to me, that seemed like a red flag because that would be very prominent in any other news outlet's article about such a thing. And I thought, again, initially, my thought is if it's a Baptist preacher, drag queens have been under attack by conservatives. They've been called groomers. They've been attacked just for reading books to kids. There are laws that have been passed in red states to ban drag performances. Trans people obviously have been subject to vicious attacks, mostly by religious conservatives, but also some atheists too who are anti-trans. These are people who don't accept their identities, don't want to use their pronouns. So, if a Baptist preacher is a hypocrite, then screw it. Expose it. But as far as I can tell, where's all the evidence that this guy's a hypocrite? So I began to look. Yesterday, I went through his church's social media. I went through the guy's social media. I went through newspaper articles when he was running for office, anything I could find about the dude, because I was looking for evidence that he basically does fire and brimstone sermons. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find anything. I searched by words. I looked through what I thought might be sermons that are potentially bad. I could not find anything. Now, it's possible that stuff exists. haven't found anything yet. I couldn't even find a policy that he has passed as mayor that would make the lives of LGBTQ people worse. Maybe it has happened. I couldn't find it. So that seemed like a major red flag. Like, why didn't they mention any of this? And if there's no proof of hypocrisy, then why the hell is this a story? And I want you to think about that because I'm glancing at some of these comments, and I think a lot of you are where I was, which is to say, yeah, expose the guy, call him out. But let's say for a moment, this guy is like a progressive Baptist. Let's say he's a Baptist who's not anti LGBTQ. If that's the case, why would anyone care? Why should anyone care what he does in his spare time? Because as far as I can see, even with his online, I'm a curvy trans woman persona, who's he hurting? Nobody. He's indulging in fantasy in anonymous forums. Like, it's not like he's doing anything to kids. It's not like there's any evidence of like infidelity or anything like that. He's just having some fun. What would be the harm if there's no hypocrisy? To me, it felt very much like that article in 1819 News was just an excuse to say, look at this dude dressing up as a woman, look at this dude dressing in drag, and let's make fun of him for doing it because that's weird. I think that's all the article was. I mean, it's a true story. He was actually doing it, but I question the news value of that story because if you're not exposing hypocrisy, then what is the point of that? People have secret lives. A lot of people, even in prominent positions, if they're elected officials or if they're famous in any way, they do things in private they don't want the public to know about. And as long as they're not hurting other people, I don't know why it should be any of our business. And even if they are hurting like other people, maybe it's between him and his family. Maybe in his case, maybe it's between him and his God. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's our problem. So, is his hobby salacious? Maybe, sure, but it shouldn't concern any of us unless he spends his time in the pulpit and in the government talking about why drag and trans people are supposedly evil. So, I could not find any proof that this guy is another Ted Haggard or Jerry Falwell Jr. He's just a dude who likes to dress up as a woman and write out his fantasies for fun. It may not be your idea of a good time, but also it's none of your damn business. And then when I started to look even more, I found even more reason to think I don't think he's one of the bad ones at all. And let me show you what I'm talking about here. I'm going to show you this picture on Facebook. This is posted by his church. Check this out. First Baptist Church, all are welcome here. And that's a sign that was on the church sign. But the thing is, a lot of churches, evangelical ones especially, love to do this game, this bait and switch thing where they say, yeah, we welcome everybody here. We're very inclusive. And then you become a member of the church. And only when you get into the weeds do you realize, oh, there should have been like a giant asterisk next to that message. Because, of course, they don't really accept trans people. Or if you're gay and in a same-sex relationship, they don't really accept that. But in this case, check out the comment here from one person. Are y'all an affirming church? And there's no response to this. It's 7 years ago. There's no response to this, but there is a thumbs up. And who gave a like to that particular question? Well, look at this. It's First Baptist Church of Phoenix City. It's like the church approved that question, which makes me think, yeah, they really are affirming. Maybe I'm wrong, but that seems interesting to say the least. And then it gets even weirder because I mentioned earlier he's part of an organization called the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. Well, here's an article from the Orlando Sentinel a couple of years ago, 20 years ago. It's a while ago. And it was basically saying, hey, there's a giant meeting of the Southern Baptists, which everyone knows about. because they're super conservative, largest Protestant denomination in the country. But in fact, there are two Baptist organizations. And if you scroll down here, they're talking about uh, the the one Copeland's church belongs to, the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. And I know this is word salad here on this page, but CBF members prefer the image of a wall of separation between church and state. CBF members are both conservative Democrats and moderate Republicans. They oppose state written school prayer and believe the posting of the Ten Commandments on public buildings violates the First Amendment. Well, that's interesting. They sound progressive. This is another thing later on. The CBF has neither creed nor confession. Its theological boundaries are less fixed and more fluid. The organization's code words are priesthood of believers, local church autonomy, and religious liberty. So it sounds very much like this dude was not running like a Southern Baptist church where the hypocrisy would be obvious, because I could point to the policies the Southern Baptists believe in and say, look at what they said here. This dude belongs to it. Doesn't sound like it. Sounds like he's part of a relatively progressive Baptist organization, at least like politically centrist at best. But they're relatively progressive, and they don't have any set of rules or creeds that they attest to. It's kind of whatever the churches decide for themselves. And then it makes more sense why all those Baptist organizations in the 1819 news article said, well, it's up to the church how they want to handle this. Because, of course, it's not a top-down organization. So that's interesting. And it's weird that First Baptist Church's Facebook page, you won't find anything that's anti-LGBTQ or anti-drag. They don't really talk about that stuff at all. I mean, they're not exactly affirming, but they're not against it either. They really just focus on the Jesus stuff. And I think if they're connected to larger conservative Baptist groups at all, it's to take advantage of other programs like missionary trips, or maybe vacation Bible school over the summer. Like, what do we teach the kids? But I'm just not seeing evidence of right-wing propaganda. So I go back to the question, why are we bothering this dude for dressing up in drag and having some fun in his free time? Like, it's possible he's a hypocrite, and I haven't seen the evidence. But again, he's not Lauren Boebert saying one thing about, what people do in their bedroom and then playing with a dude during a musical in the audience in what she thinks is a dark room. That's hypocrisy. Call out political hypocrisy or religious hypocrisy all you want. But again, I go back to that picture of him with Trump. He wasn't praising Trump. He's just saying, man, can you believe me, a small town mayor, met the president because I had to deal with this big issue? That's not that bad, to be honest. So that's where I was as of yesterday. I wrote a whole article about why I don't think it's fair to go after this guy for what they said he did. And I was bothered by it. I wish I could have talked to the dude and all that, because I just felt like it all just seemed very unfair. And then right before I started taping this tonight, I'm going to share this with you. Again, I apologize. It's really sad information. This is the headline I just caught before we went live tonight. It looks like Bubba Copeland has taken his own life. They found his body, I guess, earlier tonight. They did not say a cause of death in anything I read. But it seems like it's a fluid story. They're just trying to figure it out as we speak. If you look at this article, the sheriff only said he committed suicide the evening of November 3rd. That's today. But it did not give any details on how he died. And I'm not going to dwell on this particular article, but let's say all of that is how this story ends. Then I go back to the takeaway then is that a right-wing a right-wing media outlet outed a guy for no reason other than he does a hobby they probably think is immoral, impure, whatever the right wing site wants to call it. But the mayor didn't do anything wrong. You may not enjoy it. You may not think it's an interesting hobby. You may find it weird. It doesn't matter. But if they outed him against his will, obviously, if they exposed this secret for no reason other than they didn't like what that secret was, even though he wasn't hurting anybody, then it seems like that news outlet, that media outlet, and the people who were passing this stuff along, mocking this guy, acting like he was a hypocrite when there is no evidence of his hypocrisy that I have seen yet. I feel like that 1819 News and the reporter, uh, I want to say they deserve responsibility for it. I think that may be taking it too far, but like they need to do some soul searching about what is their purpose. What were they trying to accomplish by ruining this guy's life, by exposing the secret that wasn't hurting anybody, that wasn't evidence that he's a liar. He just did something for fun in his spare time. And that's what bothered me last night. And obviously, with this ending, with this depressing ending, it's even worse. And I feel like we haven't heard the last of this story because a lot of people are now going to have to rethink how they frame that story and how they talked about it. Several years ago, little side tangent, the website Gawker, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, the website Gawker published a story about the brother of an Obama administration official who was basically caught up meeting someone on Grinder or hiring an escort who was male or something like that. And obviously, that was a secret he wanted to keep from his family. And they published a story outing that guy. And again, you go back to the question. If you look that story up online, a lot of the commentary is, who cares? Why are you publishing this story? Because if the issue is infidelity, that happens with a lot of people. If the issue is hypocrisy, maybe there would be value, but that guy's not in the government. So, what was the point of that story? And the criticism was so loud that Gawker itself, the people running the site at the time, said, you know what? All of you are right. That we had no reason to publish that story. It felt sleazy and it felt like clickbait, so they did it, but then they pulled it down. And that's the thing. If there's no news interest to the story, then why are you doing it? It doesn't matter. By the way, I've had people tell me, like, oh, I found something secret about some atheist who might be famous. And usually my response is, why should I care? Unless there is some reason this matters to strangers, to the public, it's none of my business. There are also people, I know you've all seen this jokingly, if a pastor says something awful online, the response is always like, oh, I wonder where his Grinder profile is, or I wonder what his search history looks like. Interesting question, because again, the thinking is if it's hypocrisy, then this dude needs to be exposed. But if there's no hypocrisy and there's no evidence of Bubba Copeland's hypocrisy, then what they did to the guy to drive him to the worst kind of desperation today, that people need to rethink how they are doing these things. Just because he's a believer doesn't mean he's a bad guy. Just because he's a pastor or a conservative mayor, by the way, which is very different than someone who writes state laws, federal laws. Like, I don't know why that is justification to do to him what this news outlet did to him. Anyway, that I'm going to be thinking about this for a while now because of how disturbing that story is, but it troubled me, the fact that it ended this way. I hope bothers everybody, and I hope it makes you all and I don't say this in an accusatory way. I hope it makes all of you watching this rethink how you think about these things, because just because someone is a pastor doesn't mean that everything they do that seems liberal, that seems uh sex positive, I don't know if that's the right word, like, it doesn't mean it's hypocrisy, it doesn't mean it's wrong. And I have not seen more people calling out the original website that published that article about him, partly because the news hasn't made the rounds yet. It will, but also because I don't think they felt that the news site was doing anything wrong. And I really do think they were. Okay. So I'll stop there. I'm going to get a drink. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. They do pronounce it the same as Phoenix. I apologize. Thanks, Keith. So it is Phoenix, the city of whatever that was. What was it called again? Phoenix City. There we go. Unfair without the O. What else? Any other questions there? Do the independent fundamentalist Baptist people like Stephen Anderson fit into this Baptist universe? They don't fit into the Southern Baptist universe because they probably think Southern Baptists are too liberal as well. They exist in their own bubble, but their bubble does have creeds. Like if you go to any of those new IFB websites, they say this is what we believe. And a lot of it's conservative, like King James version only. We believe this about God and all that. But they do have a creed. It's not tied to Southern Baptists, but it is on the crazy conservative end of things. Yeah, his church is going to say he was a troubled soul. See, that's the thing. And this is Den adding this in here. I am very curious how his church reacts to any of this. I have not heard, I haven't looked, to be honest, tonight. I haven't seen any statement they've published since that article went public. But the thing is, Bubba Copeland spoke at that church Wednesday night, the day after the article came out, and they let him speak. And I watched the sermon, like no one else said anything about it. So it seems like, whatever, it's kind of embarrassing, but it wasn't a deal breaker or anything like that. But again, this goes back to, I don't know that his church is going to say something like this because I've never seen any evidence of his church saying anything like this in the past. So I'm very curious how they're going to handle this. Any other questions there? Okay. So I'm going to jump to a, I want to say less depressing story. It's awful. It's just not this one. Let me go. Let me see if I can pull this up really quick while we find some stuff. Here we go. Okay. Let's talk about Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. I know we talked about him last week, but there's something else I wanted to bring up about this guy, because one of the things I have found kind of amusing about Mike Johnson is watching the reactions to him from mainstream news outlets. It's kind of been interesting watching like CNN, MSNBC, and all them saying, this guy thinks Noah's Ark is real. And it's like, yeah, buddy, we've been talking about this for decades on this side of the aisle. Where have you all been? And it's fun reading articles where they're like, this guy is a fan of someone named David Barton. It's like, yeah, he's a Christian liar who specializes in lies about the founding fathers. We know that. But again, I appreciate that a lot of places are pointing out his Christian nationalism, and that's important. I hope more people find out about it. But one of the lesser known areas of his life that is getting some attention, but I think it's news to people, even those of us who are familiar with white evangelical circles, is the fact that he has a special marriage. Check out this article. This is from Mother Jones. The most powerful man in the House doesn't like divorce. Speaker Mike Johnson has been talking about it for decades, and now he's got a larger audience. So what does that mean? That the most powerful man in the House doesn't like divorce? That seems like a typical Christian thing, right? They don't like it. Well, Mike Johnson and his wife Kelly Johnson have something called a covenant marriage. And I was not that familiar with it before last week, before I started going down this rabbit hole here. But holy hell, this thing is wild. And basically, he has a special kind of marriage contract that is clearly stronger than all the ones all of you have signed. He's better than you. I hope you know that. And the reason he thinks all this, the reason he thinks his marriage is better than yours, is it goes back to like the late 90s, mid to late 90s. This is when, if you think about the culture wars at the time, you had more people getting divorced, and that was scary for a lot of people. You had people talking about gay marriage, and that was scary for a lot of conservatives. And they really wanted to push this idea that we got to have straight married couples stay together for the sake of the children. Divorce is never an option. And so some Christians pushed for a thing called covenant marriage. And in Louisiana, which is where Mike Johnson is from, and there were other conservative Christians in the legislature, they actually passed a law giving people this option. Check this out. This is the law in Louisiana about covenant marriage. Um, a covenant marriage is a marriage entered into by one male and one female who understand and agree that the marriage between them is a lifelong relationship. I mean, okay, fine, but isn't that just what marriage is? Everyone goes into it thinking it's a lifelong partnership. But then look at this part at the end here. A covenant marriage may be terminated by divorce only upon one of the exclusive grounds enumerated in another law. A covenant marriage agreement may not be dissolved, rescinded, or otherwise terminated by the mutual consent of the spouses. And I know that's a little bit of legalese there, but what that means is if two people say, you know what, we are not happy together, we don't love each other anymore. Yeah, we're just not in love anymore. In every state in the country right now, you can just get divorced. That's what no fault divorce is. You can just say, I want out, and then you're allowed to leave. And maybe there's some lawyers involved when it comes to how do you separate your stuff, how do you deal with the kids? That's a separate issue. But no one's stopping you from getting divorced. A covenant marriage, if you sign that contract, says, oh, you don't love each other anymore? So what? You're stuck. That's what you signed on to when you were 16 and Christian and got married, or whatever old they were. So here's the thing. Under what grounds can you get divorced under a covenant marriage? That's the question, right? And so, according to an article, this is from the Washington Post in 1997, when this Louisiana law was passed. Here's what it says. In the event their marriage should someday sour, only the most egregious betrayal, adultery, abuse, abandonment, or a lengthy separation, that's all that ends the marriage. That's it. Like, I get why some of that would qualify, but again, this means if you're just not happy, if you're not in love, you're stuck in the marriage. And that's crazy. So the Johnsons, Mike Johnson, Kelly Johnson, they were married in 1999. They were among like the most famous, most prominent people to get hitched under the covenant marriage contract. And they also became like its two poster children for the whole concept. And it made sense because Mike Johnson was a law student at the time and he helped draft the law. He worked with Tony Perkins, who's the leader of a Christian hate group, who was also a Louisiana legislator. He's the guy who got this thing passed. And at the same time, like when all this happened, one of the things they pointed out, this is from an article, this is from Slate. Check this out. Let me see if I can bring this up here. There we go. Johnson told the Associated Press he was trying to persuade all of his friends to convert their marriages. According to NOLA.com, the Johnsons became the poster couple for covenant marriage just a few months after the Associated Press article. Mike and Kelly were on Good Morning America talking to Diane Sawyer about being among the few such couples in the country. When Sawyer asked Kelly about her decision, Kelly, charming and smiling, made the idea seem romantic. Oh gosh, I would have to say, from a woman's perspective, I've been in some bad relationships before, and I just knew that when I met the man I was supposed to marry, that I wanted to know it was for a lifetime, she said. Later, she added, it's a big red flag for a woman if you decide you want the option of the covenant marriage and your mate says, no, I don't want to do that. Which, yeah, that could be a red flag. But also, if someone says, I want to get married to you, and your response is, well, do you? Let's make like a blood bond and make sure you can never leave me. That seems way scarier to me and totally not romantic at all. So that's a thing. By the way, you may have noticed this in that Slate article. The whole idea is Louisiana passes this law, and they're thinking all the other states are going to come on board because that's what they started. It's going to be such a popular idea, especially among red states, that everyone else will follow suit. That is not what happened. Arizona passed a similar law the next year in 1998. Arkansas passed it in 2001. And these laws basically give people the option of a covenant marriage. But basically, under 2% of married couples in those states have opted for a covenant marriage. No one's really doing this unless you're already basically a fundamentalist evangelical Christian. Because I think most couples are like, yeah, I'm fine with the normal marriage contract. I'm not sure why I'd want to like make it stronger. Like if you tell someone I do and I love you and I'm going through the wedding, I feel like that's all implied. There's nothing that can make it stronger. If you're doing a covenant marriage, you're saying, I don't trust you enough. I need paperwork. Otherwise, this union is not solid. And that's weird as well. So, like, here's the thing about covenant marriage. If it works for the Johnsons, all right, fine. None of my business. Same as the last story. But there is an obvious problem with this kind of heightened marriage contract because it assumes wrongly that other people go into their marriages with a foot already out the door. That's not how it works. Like most people take their marriage vows seriously, at least at first, right? They have every intention of staying together for life. And the fact that divorce is on the table as a legal option, it doesn't bother anybody because you don't think you're going to need it. Not on your wedding day, you don't. But obviously, many people realize some point down the road, you know what? I think I do need to take up that option. I do think I need to get divorced. And maybe it's because, again, maybe it's because they're not in love anymore. Maybe it's for much more serious reasons. But of course, some marriages end that way. And the problem with the covenant marriages is that those contracts now create a tougher obstacle for people looking to get out of really bad situations. Because the only thing that piece of paper does is it makes it harder for you to get out of a relationship that you really want to get out of. That's it. And that sounds horrible. Like, what if two people are no longer happy? What if they realize they're no longer compatible? Like, imagine how many evangelical purity culture couples get married at a very young age and they've been abstinent this whole time. They get married so they could stop being abstinent. And what if they realize they have no sexual chemistry and they are not at all compatible in that sense? Then maybe you would want that option down the road to leave that relationship. Maybe you realize you're not emotionally compatible because you barely know each other. That sounds like a disaster, but they couldn't leave in a covenant marriage. What if they realize down the road sorry, this just fell here. What if they realize down the road that they're just not in love? They're different people. They barely know themselves. If you get married at like 18 or 19 or even younger, which is legal in a lot of states, you don't even know yourself. And so, of course, you're more likely to need to get divorced because who is this person you've now hitched yourself to for life? Here's another one. What if your beliefs about something really important change? What about your politics? If you married someone because you thought you shared the same values, and down the road you realize, you know what? I don't think I am a conservative anymore, or I'm not a liberal anymore. What if you start doubting your religious beliefs? How many times has that happened where you marry someone because you're both devout in your faith, and then down the road, one of you realizes, I don't think I believe in God anymore. You are now very different people, and maybe you need to go your own separate ways. Like, people change their minds. People grow older and change on a lot of issues. And if you regret your marriage, I hope there's a path out for you. And here's another one that's even more damning. What if there is abuse? What if there's emotional abuse, which I'm sure a lot of conservative Christians don't think qualifies? Or what if there's physical abuse, but it's just your word against his? And now you have to go to court to like prove there was domestic violence in play. That's asking a lot of people who shouldn't have to go through that. That Washington Post article I brought up earlier actually mentioned a very good rebuttal to all this. Let me show you this. That kind of encouragement from pastors, friends, relatives to have the covenant marriage could constitute a form of emotional blackmail, critics contend, in which a reluctant man or woman is pressured into a covenant marriage and later resents it. Like, yeah, if you want to get married to someone and they say, okay, but I need you to sign this paper, and they're like, I don't know about this. Yeah, it's going to screw things up a lot. So, of course, there's a lot of pressure to sign those pieces of paper. And like, just have any of you talked to the children of people who really needed to get divorced? Like, all those kids always say, I'm so much happier because my parents separated because they needed to, and they're now happy in their own separate lives. That's so much better than living in a home where two parents hate each other and don't want to be together. Like, that's not a good idea. Remaining in a bad marriage is bad for you, it's bad for your kids. It can lead to depression and PTSD or worse. Again, it's not that any of these people getting married are trying to take the exit ramp. It's that situations change. And when that happens, it's nice to know there's a legal way out of it, even though that's going to be a really hard thing to do. A covenant marriage might sound nice in theory. It's just a horrible idea in practice. And it's really dangerous in conservative Christian circles where purity culture norms pressure people to get married young before they know each other, before they know themselves. Yikes. I mean, if you're in a broken marriage, you should not have to wait for abuse or abandonment in order to move on. And you shouldn't have to air your personal laundry in a courtroom to justify wanting to get out. But this is the same thing conservative Christians do with abortion rights. They don't like when other people make choices they don't want to make themselves. And instead of just accepting that other people are different, they try to pass laws making it harder for other people to make choices they don't like. So I'm wondering, by pushing this covenant marriage contract, how many people, probably Christians, were trapped in a marriage they wanted to escape? Mike Johnson says his covenant marriage worked fine, and I'm quoting this, because his wife has stayed with me the whole time, which is what a kidnapper says. Like, that's not what you say when you're in a happy, healthy marriage. Like, yeah, we've been married for 50 years. Why? Well, she's here, isn't she? That's not a good answer. The implication, excuse me, the implication is that his wife might have left the marriage if they had a looser contract, but the paperwork kept her at home. That just seems messed up. And again, I don't care about his marriage. It's none of my business. Mike Pence has a weird marriage. I don't care about his marriage either. It's their life, it's their decision. But this is the reason I think this is important. If Republicans win a governing trifecta in 2024, if they win the Senate back, if they keep the House, if Donald Trump becomes president again, and Mike Johnson is still Speaker of the House, what is stopping him from trying to pass a nationwide version of a covenant marriage law like the one that's in Louisiana? Because Republicans love culture war issues and they love controlling other people's marriages. They want to they refuse to protect same-sex marriage like earlier this year. They oppose interracial marriage because we've heard some people talk about how that's a horrible idea. They want to allow child marriage in many states. So making it harder for straight people, to get divorced, that seems right up their alley. And the irony that Donald Trump, if he gets elected again, would be on his third marriage, I don't think that irony would dawn on any of them, and they certainly wouldn't care. And the thing is, look, it's not that anyone would be forced to sign a covenant marriage. or a covenant contract. But the sort of people who might be pressured to sign it are probably the same people who one day are most in need of a way to break free. And Mike Johnson doesn't want to give them a way to break free. Like, there's a lot of weird things that guy believes and a lot of dangerous stuff he believes. But I think the covenant marriage thing is like an under the radar, holy shit sort of thing that should frighten a lot of people. All right, I'll take a break. What do we got here? Don't the Duggars do covenant marriage? So I'll be honest, I didn't follow their situations closely, and I don't know if the Duggar parents themselves do it and or all the kids. Like, I don't know if Joshua Duggar had a covenant marriage, but I don't think I'd be surprised if they did because they were in the same circles. So that could very much be up their alley. I just don't know the answer to that one. Wonder how they define abuse in this context. I do too. That Louisiana law did not specify. And that means, like, I don't think conservative Christians would just allow a woman to say, I'm the victim of abuse, so I want to get a divorce. No, they would never just let it be. They would say, oh, how do we know you were abused? We need some elders at the church to, I don't know, investigate. So let's make you spill the beans, make you relive whatever trauma you've been through, and then we will decide if you've been sufficiently abused or not. Like, that's what I fear how they would define abuse, because it certainly wouldn't be whatever the woman says it is. That seems very much not in line with how their religion works. So that's scary. That type of marriage commitment doesn't recognize personal growth. Yeah, you got to stay the same forever. That's the thing. Yeah, you're right. They just assume whatever you are like when you get married is how you're going to be for the rest of your life. And again, if that's true for some people, I mean, I don't think that's a great idea that you're not growing and learning, but also that's kind of scary, right? That they don't think people are going to change in significant ways once they hit the age of, I don't know, 14, whatever child marriage is. I think Jessica, my podcast co-host, mentioned this. Like, what, how old are you when your brain actually, or your skull solidifies, or like you're legally done growing in that sense? Like, aren't you in your mid 20s when all that happens? But yikes, scary stuff. Other questions here. Do you think that domestic violence is actually the point of these contracts? It gives men the freedom of being horrible and have someone that would never leave no matter what. I mean, look, I don't think it's the point of the contract. I don't think they were thinking, how can we keep women in abusive relationships? Oh, let's make them sign some paperwork. But I do think that's a natural consequence of it, that women who are in those situations, and it's almost always women that are in those situations, think about what you would have to do to get out of that relationship. Then, one, first of all, you may not want to go to anybody. You may feel like you have no choice but to stay in the relationship. But then, if you need to justify that you are the victim of abuse, what do you have to do? You have to relive that trauma in front of somebody else, whether it's a cop or a judge or some dudes at your church. And so, a lot of victims may be prevented, or may feel like they're prevented from going forward with this, because, I mean, who wants to relive the trauma? Who wants to badmouth their spouse, even if that person is abusive? I mean, so the end result is that it does give abusers a kind of pass that allows them to keep getting away with it. I don't think that was the intention, but that is what critics have been saying ever since this law was passed. I mean, honestly, this is just a different flavor of what Steven Crowder talked about during his fallout with his wife due to the expose showing his abuse. Yeah, the right wing commentator, Steven Crowder, there was video of him like being verbally abusive to his spouse. I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I don't follow Crowder closely, because I'm sane. I think he said we shouldn't allow people to get divorced. And I don't know if he said that as a joke or how seriously he meant that. But yeah, he doesn't want his wife to leave, even though it seems pretty clear they are on separate paths and they do not align on a lot of things. That's a good question. What percentage of people in covenant marriage have been divorced? Any interesting stories among them? That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer to that. I do not. But that would be an interesting thing. Not only do I want to know what percentage of people in covenant marriages have been divorced, I want to know how easy it was for them to get divorced, even within that framework, that rigid framework of narrow reasons you're allowed to leave. Like, was it as simple as saying, I was the victim of abuse, my partner committed infidelity, something else? Or did they have to jump through even more hoops that we are not aware of? I would like to know that. If anyone has any links to any papers or articles about that, please send it along. I'm very curious. Okay, let me see for the next thing I wanted to. Let me jump to a different story here. Oh, I'll do a good news one. You all deserve some good news, right? Okay, let's talk about this. Did you know the largest what's the largest Christian university in the country? I think if you ask a lot of atheists and a lot of people who follow church state separation news online, like what's the biggest Christian school in the country, they're going to get this answer wrong like 100 times out of 100. Like you might say it's Liberty University because they have a very robust online program. I'm not sure what you think might come second. Turns out it's none of that. It's not, I see in the comments, it's not Duke, it's not Notre Dame, it's not private schools because obviously those are going to be smaller. No, it's a place called Grand Canyon University. It is based in Phoenix. It is also mostly online. I think 80% of the students enrolled at GCU are online students, but it is a Christian school. And the reason it's been in the news this week is it turns out they've been lying to students for years about the cost of their grad school program. And like, they're not just lying. I mean, they're in federal trouble for how bad and big they are lying about it. In fact, let me show you this press release from the US Department of Education. Let me pull this up for a second. But basically, here we go. Boom. Pulling this up. Sorry, takes a second. There we go. The U.S. Department of Education Office of Federal Student Aid has fined Grand Canyon University $37.7 million for deceiving thousands of students. They've been defrauding the kids at their school. And like, let's talk about what's going on here because $38 million fine is a lot. So just to give you some details here, actually, you know what? I'll read some of this press release for you because it does go into some detail, but I will explain this for you. The federal student aid investigation found that GCU lied to more than 7,500 former and current students about the cost of its doctoral programs over several years. GCU falsely advertised a lower cost than what 98% of students ended up paying to complete certain doctoral programs. GCU lied about the cost of its doctoral programs to attract students to enroll, said the office. FSA takes its oversight responsibility seriously. GCU's lies harmed students, broke their trust, and led to unexpectedly high levels of student debt. Today, we're holding GCU accountable for its actions, protecting students and taxpayers, and upholding the integrity of the federal student aid programs. And look at this right here. FSA's investigation determined that as far back as 2017, GCU was not fully informing students about the cost of its doctoral programs. GCU stated that those programs cost between $40,000 and $49,000. Whoo, boy. Okay, let's unpack some of that right here. I'm going to show you what the Department of Education actually did, what they did for students. And let me just give you an example by showing you this right here. Let's say I want to get my PhD at Grand Canyon University in psychology. So I'll go to their website and I say, okay, GCU's website, I want to get my PhD in psychology, this specific type of psychology, cognition and instruction. And you start looking up the details. Look at the right side, right above my head, right here. Like, if I go through that stuff, here we go. It's 60 credit hours. Yeah, there we go. It's 60 credit hours. You can do it online. You can only transfer like 9 credits from another school. So you're really hooked into GCU to start and finish your program. And then it's $725 per credit hour. So most students would then do the math. 725. Someone do this for me in the comments. $725 for every credit hour, and you have to take 60 credit hours. So what does that come out to? I think I did this a while ago, but whatever. It would come out to like 43,500. I hope that's correct. It's like $43,000. And what the Department of Education said is, again, all of their PhD programs, these doctoral programs, cost between $40,000 and $49,000 depending on what they were doing. So sounds fine. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but I'm sure that's comparable to what other schools are doing too, so nothing weird about that. But here's what the Department of Education said in the letter they sent to the school. And this is pretty damning right here. Check this out. It turned out that when they looked at students enrolled between 2011 and 2017, it turned out 60 credit hours, like I showed you in that one program, that is not what it took to get your PhD. In fact, you had to take something called continuation courses. Like, there were a few classes you have to take in order to finish your degree, and we didn't tell you about that ahead of time. But now that you're like 50 credit hours into your doctorate with a handful left to go, and now you're stuck in the program because those credits aren't going to transfer elsewhere, now we're going to spring on you the fact that you still got more classes to take. How many continuing courses? Well, according to this chart, which again, holy cow, look at this. 30, let me pull this up a little bit here. Look at the bottom of this chart. 34.8 students had to take more than 6 continuation courses for a cost of over $12,000. 42.9% of students had to take 5 courses for over $10,000. And only 1.7% of graduates didn't have to take any of these other courses. So the point is, all of these students, the vast majority, 98% of students getting their doctorate from GCU were not paying the sticker price. They thought they would have to spend $40,000 to $49,000 to get their doctorate, but the school lied about it. That's what the Department of Education is saying. The school actually made them take all these other courses that they had to do to get their doctorate, and it cost between $10,000 to $12,000 more for, like, what is that? 77% of students had to pay $10,000 more than the sticker price. And again, the point is, if 98% of students have to pay more than what you say is the estimated cost, you are giving the wrong estimated cost. You get the drift? That's what the problem was. And that's what the Department of Education pointed out. And the thing is, it's not just that they were lying about the estimated cost. According to the Department of Education, in this letter they sent to the school, they had internal emails at GCU between people running the school that indicated that the school's leadership had been aware since at least January of 2017 that its disclosures regarding cost were incomplete or misleading. So the Department of Education says, we know that you knew about all this and you still didn't fix it. So Grand Canyon University, the officials there say, we were not lying at all. All these additional fees were mentioned to students in the fine print and other documents. But the Department of Education says that's not where you're supposed to list all that stuff. No, you have to put that up front and center. Like, that's the problem. And by the way, in addition to the $38 million fine that the government is levying on the school, they're also demanding GCU has to stop lying about the cost of a doctoral degree and find a monitor, like a objective monitor, to make sure the school is complying with the law. And the reason the government is allowed to levy this fine against a private Christian school is because GCU also happens to be the biggest recipient in the country of federal student loans. They actually get over $1.1 billion, I believe, a year in Title IV funding, which is like financial aid. So the Department of Ed has every right then to make sure those funds are being used as intended. And if the school is gouging kids' wallets to get the money, those loans are not being fairly spent. And it should say the report that the Department of Education provided said that right now more than $18 million in federal funds has been given to over 1,300 students who are right now enrolled in doctoral programs. And over the since 2018, over 7,500 students have gone through those programs, and we're talking over $122 million in tuition. Also interesting in this report, the Department of Education said, oh, by the way, we could have charged you way more as a fine because according to their calculations, they were legally allowed to institute a fine of $509 million, which would have been about $67,500 for every violation, all 7,500 plus violations. But the $38 million fine that they actually gave them, that makes it about $5,000 for every violation. And the reason the government lowered the fine is because they said GCU wasn't lying to all their students, just the ones in this very specific kind of program. It was just the doctoral students who were screwed over. It wasn't all of them. So that's where we're at this week. That's what the story was. I should say the school says, what the hell? We didn't do anything wrong. Let me show you their press release right here. This is what the school said in response. GCU categorically refutes the Department of Education's lies and deceptive statements. Let's see this thing. They categorically deny every accusation in the state. All of them. They're all wrong. And look at this. It is further evidence of the coordinated and unjust actions the federal government is taking against the largest Christian university in the country. They found a way to make this about Christian persecution, which is wild because nowhere in the department's report do they even mention Christianity. This has nothing to do with Christianity. This is just a university lying to students and basically taking their money. And the government has a responsibility to stop that. If it's funny that the government says, hey, school, you're committing a crime, and the school's response is, we're just Christian. And it's like, all right, you're the ones connecting those dots, not us, but all right, you do you. Now, here's where we're at with this whole thing. GCU has until, I believe, November 20th, like a couple weeks and change from now, to appeal the fine, whether they want to go through a judge or just write a letter saying, here's why we don't deserve it. But if the punishment stands and the school doesn't want to pay it, it is possible the federal government could just say, all right, students, if you want to go to GCU, that's fine, but we cannot give you loans to enroll in that school, or at least the doctoral program, because we don't trust that the money is being spent as they say it should be. And that would destroy the school's ability to attract students in general, but at least doctoral students. So this will be resolved one way or the other. And I will say, like, I appreciate the fact that the Biden administration, for all its flaws, the fact that they are trying to protect students from predatory schools, that is one of the things they have done right. They're doing whatever they can. They're going through the proper procedures to make it happen. And the weird thing is all GCU had to do here is tell the truth. Just let students know the actual cost of getting a PhD there. Because again, if 98% of the doctoral students are paying more than they say they need to pay, then you're lowballing the amount it costs to get a PhD. So the government is right to go after schools that are misleading students like this. All right, what questions do we have here? Um, while I find some other stuff here that I wanted to bring up. I find it funny that two different Arizona looking universities have been caught up in these shenanigans with Phoenix being an essential pyramid scheme. Yeah, man, I'm at the point where if there's a school with Phoenix in its name, sorry about that. If there's a school with Phoenix in its name, like I certainly have to think twice. Like, is this one of the good ones or is this one of the shady ones? I need to let me double check on that one, right? Those students should get a refund. Yeah, I don't know what happens there. I don't think the government's request here is going to lead to any sort of refund. Um, whoops, sorry about that. I don't think the school's going to have to give them the refund because again, the school can say we need those tuition funds in order to provide you the education that you need. The issue isn't that the students didn't need to spend the money. The issue is that the school lied in the advertising. So, I mean, the students got what they needed to get. All the school has to do is say, this is what you would be paying for, and they're not doing that. So that's messed up. Other questions here. All right. I'm going to jump to a different story. This one's out of Texas. And this is like Kim Davis once again, because there is a Texas judge who says, I don't want to do my job because I'm a Christian. And now the Texas Supreme Court gets to decide if she's allowed to do that. And the story here involves a woman named Diane Hensley, and she is a justice of the peace. And in December of 2019, this woman basically said in December of 2019 that she wanted to conduct marriages. She wanted to perform marriages for anyone who came to her in her capacity as a judge, which happens all the time. You can get your marriage certificate signed by a judge, just go to the courthouse, done. Don't have to spend money on a wedding, right? Just sign the paperwork, pay the judge whatever they need, and we're good. So that's what she wanted to do. She gets paid, I think, $100 is what she charged for each one of those. But she said, I'm not going to sign a marriage certificate for a same-sex couple. And this is after Obergefell. Like, those are legal unions. So at this point, she's saying, I want to discriminate against some people, just not others, whatever. So at that point, the Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct gave her a public warning. I mean, it was a slap on the wrist. It wasn't more than that. Basically, they said she's casting doubt on her capacity to act impartially, and she could be punished in the future. So that's where we were at in 2019. They just said, like, hey, this thing that you're doing, it seems wrong. We might have to come after you in the future because you're not following the law. And after she did that, after they said that, here's what she did in response. She filed a lawsuit against the commission. Of course she did. And she basically said, her lawyers at First Liberty, the conservative legal group, said the commission violated the Texas Religious Freedom Restoration Act by investigating and punishing Judge Hensley for recusing herself from officiating at same-sex weddings. And just to be clear, they did not punish her. They barely touched her at all. And the lawyers said the state of Texas has substantially burdened the free exercise of her religion with no compelling justification. Which is also weird because, yeah, there is absolutely a compelling justification here. The justification is people deserve to be treated equally under the law, and a judge who doesn't want to make that happen shouldn't be a judge. Like, that's it. Being Christian doesn't give you the right to ignore the law when your job is the law. Like, it wasn't okay when Kim Davis did it in Kentucky as a clerk, and it shouldn't be okay for Hensley to do it as a justice of the peace. Now, here's the thing. In her lawsuit, she was asking for $10,000 in damages. because that's how much money she calculated she was losing. Because once all this stuff happened, she said, I don't want to perform any marriages right now. Maybe that's her way out of it, right? So she wanted a declaration from the judge that anyone could do what she was trying to do and get out of gay weddings, same sex weddings, if their God told them to. So here's the thing, in 2021, a Texas judge tossed out her case. And they basically said, you can't sue the Commission on Ethics because you don't like their ruling. They're immune. They have sovereign immunity from those kinds of lawsuits. So they tossed it out on a technicality. And then an appellate court said, yeah, we agree. And they affirmed that decision. They also tossed it out on a technicality. And then Diane Hensley said, well, the Texas Supreme Court, which is all Republican, they like me. So she filed her case. She appealed to them, and they took up her case, and they heard that case this week, or maybe it was last week. It was recently. But basically, her argument is I haven't done anything wrong here, because being a Christian in her mind gives her the right to be a bigot. Now, they did ask her, like, would she be able to discriminate against interracial couples? And she said, no, I would never do that. Discrimination on the basis of race is wrong. But apparently she thinks it's okay when we're talking about gay couples. Now, here's the reason I'm kind of surprised by this. Like, I'm worried about what the Texas Supreme Court's going to do. However, there's a very easy way out of this for everyone, because Hensley could just say, I don't want to perform any marriages at all as a judge. I don't want to do any weddings. And I don't care if the reason she takes that path is because she doesn't want to perform same-sex weddings. But all she has to do is say, I'm not going to do that as part of my job, because this is optional. She has that ability to say no to weddings, but she's not taking that step. She wants to be able to sign marriage certificates for straight couples and not gay ones. And she thinks her religion is more important than the law, even though she's working for the government. And I'm just saying, if we allowed officials like her to pick and choose which rules to follow based on their religious beliefs, it would throw the government into chaos. Like, it would make a mockery of civil rights law. So, I mean, the thing is, no one is punishing her right now for her religious views. She says this is all anti-Christian, and no one's punishing her for being a bigot. They're going after her because of her actions, because she's refusing to do her job. If a Christian judge just said, I don't want to do any marriages because of my views, that would be fine. She just wants to exclude people. That's the problem. There's one tangent to this story that I found kind of surprising. Last month, Diane Hensley actually did an interview with a mainstream news outlet, which seems very unusual for people like her. And she did it with the Dallas Morning News. And there was one nugget in that story that I was shocked by, and it's the fact that she had a gay brother. And this is that part of the story. Hensley said her older brother, who died of ALS, was gay. Wait for it. After he had a falling out with their parents over what she described as economics, Hensley said she hired a detective to track him down once a year and take a photograph as a gift for their mother. 1 year he was in Paris, another year in Japan, then Dubai. And this idea that this gay dude had a falling out with her parents, I don't know what it means that it was about economics, but he left, living his best life all over the world. And what does Diane Hensley do? She's hiring a private detective to stalk the poor dude and get his picture like a weird paparazzi dude, and then sending it to mom. And she justifies that later in this piece by saying, the two of them reconciled at some point later, kind of. But also, that's just weird. She's a weird person. It's creepy. It's just messed up. So again, and by the way, her lawyers, when they were in front of the Texas Supreme Court, they argued that the U.S. Supreme Court has already sided with a Colorado website designer who refused to make wedding websites for gay couples, which was a weird story because no gay couples had actually asked her to make a wedding website for them. But they said the Supreme Court said it was okay for that religious business owner to put her religion over anti-discrimination law, and therefore it should be okay for Diane Hensley too. But you don't need a law degree to realize there's a difference because the website owner was a private business owner and Diane Hensley is a public judge. We're comparing apples and oranges here. But it doesn't mean the Texas Supreme Court's going to do the right thing. I'm very worried about what they're going to do because if they say she's in the clear to do this, what is stopping other Texas judges or Texas officials from using their religion as an excuse to deny justice to some other group of people? So, I don't know. Scary outcome. We'll see how this goes. They're going to issue a decision soon enough. But this lady is just trying to get away with bigotry under the name of Jesus. Any questions at this moment? What would she have done if a religious judge didn't allow any of her divorces? Are we talking about Diane? Was she divorced multiple times? I cannot remember. I apologize. But yeah, I mean, this goes back to the slippery slope of it all. If you let a judge say, "I'm going to put my religious beliefs first, so I'm not going to do my job," you shouldn't be in the job. Just like with pharmacists who say, "I don't want to dispense birth control," it's like then you shouldn't be a pharmacist. It's all good. Kim Davis reference. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Kim Davis had like 4 marriages with different people, and apparently that's okay. But signing a wedding certificate for same-sex couples not okay. Who knows? Any other questions here? Yeah, she just needs to recuse herself from any cases that involve non-binary people, right? It's just stop doing your job. Retire and be a church leader. That's clearly what she wants to be doing. Anything else there? I got one more story for you, and then we're gonna call it a night here. um, this is an interesting one. Let me pull this up for a second. And yeah, here we go. So there is a school in West Virginia, a public high school in West Virginia, and they last year forced students to attend an in-school religious revival. And 18 months after that, they just settled that lawsuit. And we'll talk about that in a second. But let me show you how egregious this was. This happened in February of 2022 at Huntington High School. And I'm going to show you this Facebook post. Where did this go? There we go. Check this out. This is from Nick Walker Ministries. And it says, "What a morning. We just got back from Boyd County High School and Huntington High School, where 50 students gave their lives to Jesus at their voluntary club meetings." Which, I mean, that's a weird metric to keep tabs on, but he says it's a voluntary meeting, right? Turns out it was not voluntary at all because that's what this story is about. It turns out Walker did not visit some after school Bible study. He was the focus of an assembly that took place during the school day. And actually, kids said, I'm going to read you this post. Here's what a student wrote in response to Nick Walker and in response to the media. This is from Max Nybert. And he says a Christian revival sermon was recently given in the auditorium at Huntington High School during school hours. As a student, I heard the man hosting this event referred to by faculty as a guest speaker, with no mention of religious affiliation or intent. Religion has no place in our public schools. Even our founding fathers, as faithful as they were, knew that. The fact that a Christian pastor was invited here to speak to and persuade young people like myself while we're supposed to be learning repulses me. And he talks about Nick Walker. Students were encouraged to attend another meeting at a church where several were baptized. Walker has gone to several high schools. Yeah. The following photos and videos are just a shred of footage taken by high school students, my peers, and even Nick Walker's own ministry. This should not be swept under the rug. It is blatantly disregarding the legal separation of church and state, and something needs to change so that myself and other students like me are free to make up our own minds and hearts on philosophical and religious matters. He says whether students were made to attend this meeting or not is unclear. The text would suggest they were made to attend the thing. Walker said it's voluntary. But check this out. I have heard that teachers signed up students they thought needed it, including Jewish students. and that kids were threatened with suspension if they left the assembly. He's not saying those are facts, those are hearsay, but he's also worried. And again, he included some photos that looks like a church service with hands up in the air. There's video. I'm not going to play that for you right now. But again, so this kid, Max, he heard a lot of rumors about how bad this was. He was definitely concerned, but he says it happened during the school day. So that's pretty messed up. And the thing is, when the school was confronted about all this, they basically said, yeah, this definitely did happen the way Max described it. Because here's what the school, this is from when? February 3rd, last year. Check this out. The Jed Flowers, director of communications at Cabell County Schools, referred to the situation as a mistake. He's admitting it. It's a mistake. Of course, as soon as we heard about the situation, we did make the changes that we had to make. Unfortunately, the mistakes in this case, in taking the students and taking them to that as part of a requirement, it was a mistake. Sorry, there we go. The teachers made a mistake, he said. It was a mistake, Flower said. It was something we addressed immediately, and we hope will never happen again. So again, the spokesperson for the district is saying, yeah, it was required. It shouldn't have happened. We didn't mean to do that. We're not going to let it happen again. But he admits it. He admits it. And so one interesting thing is a couple days after all this went down last year, Max, our friend Max, the student at the school, he decided to stage a protest. And he even wrote a letter explaining to the district why he was doing it. My favorite part about this letter is the fact that one of the arguments the school made here is that the assembly, that was actually a religious revival, it took place during a school period that is not technically when students are in the classroom. It's like a free period when students can go see their teachers, go to a tutoring center, things like that. So they're working, but they're not formally in a classroom. The school said, yeah, they were taken to the assembly during that period, but that's not really an important period. That's why we allowed it to happen. And so in this letter that that Max sent, he even said, I want to show you this. Where did this go? Here we go. I want to make sure you can see this here. According to the letter, our own head principal, Dan Gleason, recently claimed that Compass, which is that free period, is non-instructional time. If this is truly the case, and the creators of our school schedule left a 30-minute gap in the middle of the day for seemingly no reason, it should not present a problem for students to be out of school during this time. So Max staged a protest where students walked out of school during that period. In other words, if a revivalist Christian sermon can be held for students, we claim the absolute ability to protest the violation of our rights that accompanied the sermon during the same apparently pointless period. I love it. That is a badass kid. I love that. So he staged a protest. He was joined, by the way, by over 100 students. I want to show you that too, because there was an article written about that at the time. This is from NBC News. Oh no, go away. There we go. Christian revival at high school prompts student walkout in West Virginia. And there we go. There's our friend Max holding up his signs. My rights are non-negotiable. It's not a church. There's no cross on top of the school. So that's what the protest did. Now, I say all that to just set the scene for you. Around this time, the Freedom from Religion Foundation also got involved. They sent a letter to district officials wanting clarification on this mistake. They wanted staff members reprimanded if they said this was mandatory. They issued a records request trying to figure out who invited Nick Walker to this school and why. And by the way, this same district has been in trouble before too, because according to FFRF, the district had a policy that allowed teachers to initiate and lead religious activity for students, allowing outside adults to preach to kids at school-sponsored events, and no one in school did anything about this. They also pointed out in 2019 that the superintendent allowed Christian clubs that were created by adults, which is not okay. and they didn't get a response from the district. In 2017, FFRF wrote to the previous superintendent about other religious assemblies that took place during the school day. And the district said, sorry about that, we're not going to let it happen again. But clearly, they didn't put a stop to it because it happened this last year as well. And so, for all these reasons, this is why FFRF last year filed a federal lawsuit against the school district. They literally, you could see this right here. They filed a lawsuit against that West Virginia school district last year, basically saying on behalf of a bunch of kids and their parents, the lawsuit charged that teachers escorted their entire class to the revival. One of the mothers of a Jewish student was one of the plaintiffs. And they said that all this stuff was happening. Basically, the lawsuit said kids at that assembly were instructed to bow their heads in prayer, raise up their hands. They were warned that they needed to make a decision to follow Jesus or face eternal torment. Adult volunteers from a local church went into the crowd to pray with students, and the students observed teachers and administrators praying with church volunteers. This is all laid out in the lawsuit because FFRF got the information they were looking for and were able to fill in the gaps where in the past Max said some of this stuff is hearsay. Well, FFRF actually got the details and they said, holy crap, this is bad. We're suing. So this is what happened last year. And I want to be clear, these were not atheist students and their parents holding a grudge. These were just students and their parents who understood the law better than the adults running the school district. This wasn't about money either. This lawsuit actually says we only want, if the judge rules in our favor, all the plaintiffs are asking for $1 each, because this isn't about making money. We just want the school district to stop all this. So here's why I'm bringing all this up, because all of this happened a while ago, right? The good news here, and this is from FFRF this week, they announced that they had secured policy changes in their lawsuit. It turns out the district has settled the case. And what a settlement means in this case is they're not admitting any wrongdoing, but they will pay I'm going to show you this right here. They will pay a hell of a lot of money in legal fees. The board agreed to settle up for $1 in nominal damages to each plaintiff, which is all they wanted, and nearly $175,000 in attorney's fees, which were paid by the board's insurer. So they have to pay FFRF's legal fees, but they're also changing their policy. The new policy changes say all employees in the district have to take an annual in-service training when it comes to church-state separation laws. And that training will it'll teach them, you cannot use prayer, religious reading, or religious symbols as a devotional exercise or in an act of worship or celebration in a school setting. The policy also says principals will attempt in good faith to monitor graduations, assemblies, athletic events, and anything else that's school-sponsored to make sure religion isn't seeping through. The policies require those principals to report violations to the superintendent within 7 days, and it forbids employees from initiating religious worship with students. Now, some of those policies were already in place before FFRF filed their lawsuit, but the district now has to follow its own rules. The training for employees is a new thing, though, so that's an important deal. I should also point out, FFRF says that all of the students that were involved in this lawsuit, check this out, they awarded $2,000 scholarships to 6 of the student participants in honor of their activism. And Max Nybert, the kid who publicly put all this out there, he was actually given an activist award by FFRF last year. So yay for that. Happy ending. I'm glad the students spoke out. I'm glad FFRF spoke out, and the district will now have to change its ways. That's how it should have happened. It just took long enough. I got one more thing I want to show you, but got any other questions here? And it's not a mistake to invite students to a revival without being upfront on what that event is. Yeah, fair question. Why would teachers even be like, hey, just come to this assembly? I don't know what it's about. It's a guest speaker. Like, as a teacher, I promise you, they knew who the guest speaker was. You would have been told that information. So that was weird. What does next friend mean in the list of plaintiffs? Let me pull that up for a second here. Um, you know what? I'm not going to answer that question because I don't know the legal answer to it, but I'll show you. Maybe someone else can answer for us in the comments here. It says here there are a bunch of adults who are filing the lawsuit against the school district, and they're acting on their own behalf, and they're acting as a parent of a minor who is not going to be named in the lawsuit. But I do not know the legal term next friend. So maybe someone in the comments can answer that, and we'll come back to it in a second. Is this the one where they separated the boys and girls? No, I think that was actually a different assembly we talked about a couple weeks ago in a different state. So this one, I don't believe they separated by gender, and they didn't talk about gender issues. They just proselytized. And how do I set up an anti-theist meeting at my local public high schools? I'm kind of not joking. I mean, the answer is if students want to form a club, regardless of the topic, students can form an atheist club. Students can form a Satanist club if they wanted to. There usually is a process, and it's different in every district. But again, as long as it's the students who want to put it together and organize it and fill out the paperwork, they might need an adult sponsor, but as long as it's student led and run and stuff, they could form the group. The Secular Student Alliance, if any of you want to start an atheist group, the secular students, it's secularstudents.org. You can go to that website. They'll kind of guide you through their end of things. But again, this is up to you. Got to go check with the high school and see what they need you to fill out to start a club. That's usually it. All right. I got one last video for you here. It's a short one, but it's from Kenneth Copeland, the famous scam evangelist. And, I watch him for fun. He's a hoot. And I'm going to show you a clip from what he said during a big revival event over the weekend, because for a guy who's arguably the richest, evangelist in the country, and I've heard estimates from a few $100 million to several $100 million. None of it's verified. This is how he talks about tithing and giving 10% of your money to the church. And again, this is a guy who wants all of you to tithe. And then he acts like, yeah, I give some of my money to church too, which I always laugh because it's like, yeah, buddy, but you giving up some of your money means nothing because 10% of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars is not. Anyway, here's the clip.
And here's the thing that you must always remember. When you don't tithe, you've got a ticking time bomb in your pocket. And it'll explode right when you needed it not to. Why would anyone not want to tithe? Have you figured out by now God doesn't need your money? He's doing very well. But the reason he insists on it is so that he has the opportunity to enter into our affairs and then turn around and bless us and spend it all back on us.
There you go. You got to give God your money through Kenneth Copeland so that God can give you money. I mean, sure, you could just keep whatever you have in your pocket, but then you're going to hell. That's how it works. And he calls it a ticking time bomb. If you don't tithe, it's like a weapon in your pocket that's going to go off against you. Like, it doesn't get more threatening. The rhetoric doesn't get more threatening than that. Like, I know churches always use pressure campaigns to get people to give money to them, but I don't think I have heard that language of a ticking time bomb to describe the money that's in your pocket that should be in his pocket. That to me was wild. And again, if you ever watch Kenneth Copeland's sermons, and you really shouldn't for your own mental health, all he talks about all the time is flying his damn airplanes. He loves airplanes. They are his favorite toys. And he talks about flying them when he was a young man and how much he likes flying them now. And how one time he needed a plane and he prayed for it. And then someone called him up out of the blue and said, I have a plane for you. And then that's just how it works in his people's circles. So, anyway, this seems like an appropriate time to say if you have money that is a ticking time bomb in your pocket and you're looking to get rid of it, um, I don't know, ticking time bomb, or you could go here and I will protect you, I guess. Or nothing will happen at all and everything will be fine. It's really up to you. All right. So I think I will stop there. And if there are any other questions, happy to answer them. And I will thank you, Den, for all your help tonight, too. If God doesn't need the money, Copeland needs to reverse tithe to the congregation. He absolutely should. That's what I was trying to get at earlier. So, Rick Warren, the guy who wrote Purpose Driven Life, he famously said, I also tithe to my own church, but I don't tithe. I reverse tithe. I give 90% of my money to the church because that's how devout I am. And again, it always made me upset because it's like, dude, you're very, very wealthy. A wealthy person giving up 90% of their money and sticking with the 10%, that's still way more money than everyone else has. So you're not really making a sacrifice there, are you? Like, you should be giving away 90% of your money. That's not something special. You're not unique. And also, giving it to the church is very different from like giving it to charity. So, any other questions there? Next friend is a person that represents another person that is underage. Gotcha. Thank you very much. It can also represent someone with a disability as well. I learned something new. Thank you very much. All right, everyone. I'll call it a night. I'll see you here next week if you're so inclined. Thank you, Den, for all your help, and have a good weekend, everybody.